Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. So for this video today, someone had sent me a parcel that I had purchased and it had this dressmaker pattern, some sewing pattern, tissue paper as the packaging to keep things safe and from moving around. And I had put it aside thinking, I know exactly what I want to do with that, I'll do it soon. And then somebody reminded me not too long ago, I think it was a comment on one of my YouTube videos, that do we have any videos using tissue paper and things? So I thought, waste not, want not, I will use this as my tissue paper. Now I did find a relatively clean spot that didn't have too much of the patterning. Now the patterning itself, actually like the print on there, can be beautiful and useful for a lot of mixed media work and things. So I'm going to keep that. I love using this tissue paper. But I'm going to use these 3 stamps today to create a couple of different looks for you. Because tissue paper is a great starting point for even card making. So this is the stamp set called Text Background, and I have some kind of, I think this is brownish ink here. It's a little VersaFine clear little ink cube, and I have these smaller finish text, and I'm not going to put this on a block because I don't want this to be the whole perfect stamp. I'm just going to get little bits of it so that it's not readable anyway, the text, you can't read it. Then I got some of that larger alphabet, which is that middle stamp from the same set, and I'm just going to stamp it down a bit randomly. I press it on little certain pieces. I don't want the whole thing to come out perfect. It's kind of background noise, so to speak. Now this is the Leaf Clusters stamp set. And this is definitely one of those stamp sets that I could use in every single video. I love this one. I'm going to pull out a couple of the different branches to use here. And I am going to pop these ones on an acrylic block, but I'm definitely not looking for perfect coverage. So I have got this one here and I'm not pressing down very hard. You see I got 2 little impressions there from just one re-inking. I don't want to press down hard. I just want it to be kind of that really rusticy looking background. It doesn't have to be perfect. I double stamped that top one. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. And then I'm going to come in with the other branch and just do a tiny little bit. I probably didn't really even need to do this one, but I don't even ink this one up perfectly. I just ink up a little bit of it and then stamp it a couple of times too. The next step in this process is to attach this down to my page. Now I'm going to use some matte medium. This is exactly what is in my little glue bottles that I use for glue. And I just put a little bit down there with a paintbrush. I'm going to water it down just a little bit. This just makes it easier to work with. Not too much water that it becomes watery, but just a little bit will kind of help it go on the page a little bit more smoothly. And I'm just going to go the entire page. This is not a watercolor sheet at all. This is just a normal piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to pop this down, but I'm really working so that I get some crinkles in there. So I want there to be crinkles. I even have a little rip there. That doesn't matter at all either. And then once this is done, I'm just going to pop this to the side. And I just wanted to show you another option. This is a really quick option that you can do as well. I'm using that same kind of glue that has just been watered down a little bit, popping it down with the paintbrush, and then this, I have another sheet of the exact same tissue paper, and I'm going to pop this down, but I really want to make sure it's got lots of wrinkles in it. And so even for a little bit more, I will kind of wrinkle it up beforehand, and then I really bring it in with my fingers to get lots of good texture in the background. Now don't get me wrong, this is a little bit different because my tissue paper that I'm starting with is brown, and so that's going to be different from your white tissue papers, but you can pretty much use the same techniques with all of these. Give them a wash if you want, a wash of watered down color if you want to color it to begin with. It doesn't have to make it into a brown. It could start with any color. You could use blues or pinks, anything at all. But I just thought I would use what I had on hand rather than going out and purchasing something so that I could show you. I appreciate that someone used this as packaging and then I am able to reuse it again in my projects. Now if you don't like really bulky texture, I suggest that you go over it with a brayer and this will flatten it all down, but you can see I have all of those gorgeous lines and texture that has been created in the background too. Now again, I'm going to pop this aside and leave this to dry before I start cutting off all of the edges. So I did leave it to dry and I'm decided to just kind of cut off those extra little bits and then I'll do a bit of work and then I can trim it down later, properly straight if need be. Now my other watercolor set is currently being used by a gorgeous little 6-year-old girl in the background. So this is my kind of plan B that I don't usually show on camera. I don't think this one is available anywhere, but I'm just using some blue paint from this one. Nothing at all special. You could use inks, you could use paints, you could use acrylic paints and water them down a little bit more. Don't ask me why I went for such a small brush. I really needed to get a bigger brush and just go for gold. At this point, I thought I may have done some sort of ombre or moved into greens or a darker blue, so I wasn't sure. But obviously I was probably chatting away to my daughter at the same time, and that's probably why I didn't reach for a bigger paintbrush either, but that's okay. So you can see that all of those wrinkles are kind of picking up that colour and really grasping at it, and it kind of settles in those nooks and crannies there that we created from the texture of the tissue paper. So I really, really love this look. I think that it provides so much extra background things going on without having to use things like stamps or stencils or dies or anything like that. Really just using some glue and some tissue paper. And then from here I did dry this, and obviously you can stop at any stage, but I took a darker ink. This is the chipped sapphire, so this is obviously an oxide ink, whereas I did the bottom layer in watercolors. It just doesn't matter, and I'm going to lightly rub this over the top to really bring out those background lines. So that could be one gorgeous background ready to go with some tissue paper. Now back to the first one that we created. This is nice and dry. I am going to snip off the edges, but when it comes to something kind of delicate like this and something that could potentially tear, I do like to use this little Holtz trimmer instead of my trimmer with the sliding blades, because this one is not going to catch. It comes straight down on top of the pattern, so that's the reason that I'm using this one. This cuts really straight, really crisp lines, which I also like. I do love my little sliding trimmer. I find that definitely the easiest one to use, but I do like this one when it comes down to things that I don't want to tear or that could tear. Now this is the Butterfly Trio from Stampendous, and unfortunately I think this one has been discontinued. I did Google it and you can still pick it up in a few places. This is one of my favorite stamps, and I'm so frustrated that this one has been discontinued. Now at this point I do have my little helper on my knee, so I'm going to stamp out the one at the top, and then my little helper, my son who is 3, he would like to stamp one down the bottom. Now these videos have come out of order, and there was a stamp where I did using tiny little squares, and I ended up using his butterfly. He gave me permission to use it, so I used his butterfly on a project that has already been, the video's already been released. But he did a really good job stamping that one out, and I am going to put some clear embossing powder over top of these and then melt this. This is always a fun part. It always looks gorgeous. It gives them a little bit of shine. It's a really gorgeous butterfly. But given that the rest of my card kind of has that tea stain brownish look, the stark white for this was a little too much for me. So I used some vintage photo distress oxide ink, which is the only brown water reactive ink that I have. And I just put a little wash of it over top of my butterfly. This is not going to be the color at all, but it really does change the look of the whole butterfly once I do end up coloring it. And it changes how the colors are going to work. So even though I didn't have, I could have stamped this out probably on some of the tissue paper, but I don't know why I chose to do it this way. I just did. Probably because I was multitasking with my gorgeous boy on my knee, and so this is just what came to my head at the time. I'm going to use some Wilted Violet and Villainous Potion, which is basically just 2 different shades of purple, and then I added a little bit of chipped sapphire there onto the block just because at this point I wasn't sure. Now because I've added that distress color down originally, the vintage photo, it's changing all of these colors of course, so don't expect them to be true, and that's what I wanted and I needed. I didn't want this to be a really bright card because the background was already kind of that brown color, had all those brown colors running through it, so I wanted the butterfly to have a little bit of color but not to be like bright and super cheerful, otherwise I thought it would look a little bit out of place. So I just use a little bit of those couple of colors, and then I'm going to put that one aside to dry too. Now back to my card front, I have my stamping platform, and inside the stamping platform I just use the Sizzix sticky grid sheets. I do have a video on showing just how I pop them in, but basically I just cut them down a little bit if you need to. I don't think I do need to with this stamping platform. And then I take off both sides of the adhesive release sheet, and then I just put sticky washi tape around the outsides, and that helps hold it in place in my stamping platforms. But I have taken the same leaf clusters, in fact the same stamp that I used to begin with, And you can see here, I have not gone for full coverage when inking this up. It's kind of, I'm trying to show you that I kind of missed some spots on purpose because I don't want this to be perfect, crisp stamping. I forgot to do the stem there a little bit, but you can see even though I didn't get a good impression to begin with, I'm pressing quite lightly. I don't want it to be utterly perfect, and that's going to match the background. So I've just done one there. This is using the VersaFine Onyx black ink, so it's a really crisp stamping black ink. But in this case, I am making sure that it doesn't stamp perfectly, as I said, just to go with the kind of theme of the card. So, and the good thing about using a stamping platform is that I can kind of press down, and then if I didn't get quite enough coverage of what I was thinking, I can press again without having to shift my stamp at all. And then just a little bit coming from the top, and I didn't really need that bit probably, but I want to pop my butterfly about here. But when I'm coming to fussy cut out this butterfly, there is no way that I enjoy fussy cutting out his antennae. So I'm always going to stamp down the butterfly first, and then that way I know that I don't have to even worry about the small, finer images. And I quite like it if you choose to lift up the wings a little bit. I like it that you can see the butterfly image underneath as well. So when I go around and fussy cut these, I use my Cutter Bee scissors. These have a gorgeous fine tip to them. These are my favorite for fussy cutting. Then, of course, I love the black and white sentiment sheets from Paper Rose. You've seen this one lots and lots of times. These are so handy, and I didn't know if I would like these when I purchased them. I purchased them just to kind of see. Once I thought I liked the sentiments, I purchased them, and I love these. They are really, really handy. They're quite a good weight of cardstock. They're definitely not light cardstock, so I appreciate that. Maybe around, I mean, I'm guessing, but 90 or 100 pound or so they're quite good cardstock. And I was just figuring out which one I wanted to use on my project. There are lots that could have worked for these, and of course any sentiments in your stash which are probably going to work as well. For me, I wanted this one to be the Get Well Soon. I have someone in mind who I'm going to send this to. So I know that this kind of style is right up her alley as well, so hopefully she will enjoy that. I cut this down, and I didn't want to have a white background because all of these sentiments come with the choice. You can either have it in white or so like white background and black printed, or a black background with white printing. But I didn't want to have the white because I didn't have any other white in this card, and because of that also I chose to go with a craft card base rather than a white card base. Now I'm sorry why my camera chooses not to focus right at that second, but I put a little bit of foam tape on the back and then have popped down my card front panel. I am popping some glue just in the center of my butterfly, so his little wings are going to stay mobile, not super dimensional, but just a little bit mobile. And then I have popped some foam tape on the back of the sentiment, and then that's going to squidge just down there. And then that is pretty much my card finished for today. So I hope you have enjoyed this card. I will have links to all of the supplies down in the description box below this video. Let me know in the comment section down below what your favorite techniques are to use with tissue paper, but I hope this has given you some ideas, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!